All right, it is now 7 p.m. Before we officially call the meeting to order, we'd like to do a moment of silence and then the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you'd like to stand with me. We'd like to take a moment of silence for all faiths and beliefs to have a silent prayer. Thank you. And if you join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I'd like to officially call the meeting to order. Deb, would you please call roll?
Counselor Buck, Counselor Lenhart.
Yes.
I'd like to note for the record, Counselor Lenhart is attending virtually. Counselor Harvey is excused absent. Counselor Cry.
Here.
Counselor O'Brien.
Here.
Counselor O'Brien is also attending virtually. Counselor Bremen.
Here. All right, we've got an agenda before us. Are there any changes to that agenda?
There was a change to the agenda, Mr. Mayor, with the addition of the minutes of the December 7th City Council meeting. For the record, I emailed those to the City Council yesterday and added them to the packet about 9:30 this morning.
All right. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
I move that we approve the agenda as amended.
Counselor O'Brien,
Yes.
Counselor Cry,
Yes.
Counselor Buck, Counselor Bremen,
Yes.
Counselor Lenhart.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right, our next item is we've got our presentation tonight from our Arts and Culture Board, and they're going to go over some of their goals for 2022. Looks like you guys have most of your board here. Is that correct? All right. So I don't know who's going to be talking if you, all right. If you want to step up to the mic, because it's, I know we ought to be able to hear, those online have to be able to hear you. So we want to make sure everybody can
Great. Are we
hear
good
this great
here?
stuff. Yes.
All right. Hi, I'm Nancy Patterson. Thank you so much for having the Arts and Culture Board. There, that wondrful group. Sadly, no Kyle this evening, our liaison, and Tom Cassell. But wow, it was quite a year. We got an awful lot done. And before we get going with goals for next, I just have to say one more time, this group is amazing. And I'm so proud of them for all of their hard work and dedication. And that said, we are ready to roll with 2022. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about our goals. We have 3 things that we are going to really focus on in the next little while. One is we'd like to create a scholarship program, unlike many of them that are out there. We want to not only make funds available to individuals who may need a hand with anything in the arts, musical instruments, classes, lessons of some sort. We'd also like to make our scholarship available to teachers who may want to have a special project and don't have the funding for it, to folks that want to put on a cultural event in the area and might need a hand. So what we'd like to do is allot 25% of what we earn each year with our fundraising efforts toward that, up to 25% toward those scholarships. Right now, we have about up to $2,500 available for 2022. Those funds were from our 2 years ago art stroll. We did not, of course, have one last year, and there is no plan this year to have one, but we're cooking some ideas for fundraising. So right now we are fully funded and would like to have your approval to allocate those funds for that project. Is that something that we can do this evening, or that you will contact us about at some point?
I think we probably would have, have to put it on the agenda, correct, Mike?
All right.
To allocate.
Yeah, we can put it on the next meeting's agenda to officially allocate it.
Right.
Thank you.
Yep.
That'd be terrific. We're looking forward to that. The next item, oh, and by the way, this is something that we could get going on rather immediately. And so our goals are very actionable right now, kind of a mid-range thing, and then something very long-term and special again. Let me tell you about our mid-range. That's the video series that we would like to put together celebrating our creatives here in Fruita. There are so many talented people in this community. And, you know, when you're an artist, you frequently are doing your thing in a small area, small studios, small space. Maybe you don't get to perform as often as you might like. And so we would like to acknowledge the folks that we have here in town that are doing some really amazing things with a short video interview celebrating why they do what they do, why they do it in Fruita, what makes Fruita supportive and special for their artistic endeavors. And we'd like to take that, we're compiling a list of artists, which is pretty deep. So we'll be adding an interview, maybe one a quarter to start with. And then once we're kind of up to speed, we'll have them more regularly. We'd like to feature those not only on our own social media, but on the city website. And create a directory of artists and how to contact them so that some of our creatives can have opportunities maybe to perform or do their thing elsewhere. So give a hub where they can be reached. And then the possible outcome of the videos would be to edit a short film about Fruita as a creative community and possibly submit that to some of the film festivals and that sort of thing and get the word out about how fantastic this community is in regard to the arts. That's my part of it. It's fantastic all the way around, but my part is there. And then the long-term goal, God knows we need another long-term goal, right? Since we just wrapped up the roundabouts. What we would really like to talk with you about is creating a music park here in Fruita. And if you're not familiar with what is a music park, it's a series of instruments, percussion instruments, very sculptural, but ADA accessible and you know, across the board age-wise. But there are companies and communities that are putting together these wonderful interactive parks that get kids and adults outdoors in the sunshine and, you know, moving rather than being in front of a screen. So we would very much like to start thinking about where we might put a park like that. Certainly, you have to be conscious of neighborhoods and that kind of thing. We do have our eye on a little piece of property that y'all own. I don't know if that's something that you want to get into this evening, but we'd sure like an opportunity to talk to you about it further after the new year.
I think we could set up, you guys come into a workshop.
Yes, we'd love to do that. Explain the park, premise. We have some rough funding, or pricing for the instruments themselves. Of course, there's design and landscaping and all those other things that need to be accounted for. It'd be a really good idea for us to maybe hash through that before we get too excited. But we would love to tackle that as our next endeavor.
All right, that sounds good. Although that's very interesting. Does anybody have any questions for Nancy?
No, but you guys are aware, we have one piece like that that's on the corner of the circle.
Yes.
And the businesses would love to get it off of that corner.
Right, right. So, and I get it. I completely get it. And that could maybe be the first piece to be installed at this new location. Am I free to say the location?
I'm curious.
Okay. Well, what we're eyeballing, having visited the park in Moab and seeing what that involves, talking to some of the neighbors that live nearby and trying to get a feel for what's the impact here. We tried to choose a piece of property, of course, that the city already has, that is in a business area, but not residential, also in an area that is not quite as close in as our downtown area. So what we're thinking is right next to the dinosaur journey. There's a very slim, narrow piece of property that abuts the dinosaur journey and its parking lot on one side. And I think it's McDonald's or something on the other side. Now, there is a campground on the far side, but the end of the property has a big dip and some distance before the campground area starts. So might work. That's kind of where our head is at right now. I don't have a clue if y'all have a plan for that property, but I'd like to throw our hat in the ring. And we're open. We'd just love to have a conversation.
Sounds great. Anybody else? Karen or Heather? You guys have any questions?
No, just thank you. You're a very impressive group. Have you ever thought about running for office? You get stuff done.
We do get stuff done. And yeah, that is, yeah, that's something we're awful proud of. And it's a pretty impressive group, I have to say. So yes.
We appreciate everything you guys do for our community.
Thank you.
sure.
We're looking forward to next year and we'll get that workshop going.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks all of you.
All right, with that, we're going to move into public participation. So this section is set aside for the city council to listen to comments by the public regarding items that do not otherwise appear on the agenda. Generally, the city council will not discuss the issue and will not take an official action. So if there's anybody in the audience that'd like to speak on something not on the agenda, now would be the time. If you'd please step up and state your name and address for the record, and then we please ask you to limit your comment to 3 minutes.
Archie Lopez, 1681 Ruby Lee, Fruita. And I just want to pray for this meeting and for all you guys. So without further ado, Father in heaven, thank you so much for this time to come before you and just to ask you to bless these folks who take their time to come and make decisions, those who are here and those who are here virtually as well. We pray, Father, that you would give them wisdom and discernment to make choices for this community that would bless us. And we thank you for that. And we give you thanks in Yeshua's name. Amen.
Thank you, Archie. Is there anybody else that would like to speak on something not on the agenda? Could you please state your name and address for the record?
I'm McKenna White, and I run 1039 19 and a half road, and I'm here about a dog park. There is one off-leash one 20 miles from Fruita, and all of us probably have a dog or like a cat. And I was thinking that we could like build one here so everyone can bring their dog and socialize and I don't know, just like be there and just hang out. And so they wouldn't have to like take their dogs like 20 miles from Fruita because I don't think you would really. But you could just take your dog on a walk. But would you really just want to like take your dog on a walk with other people? And where I live, there isn't any sidewalks, and I have 2 dogs, and I have to walk them like on the road, and they're not that old enough yet to go to a dog park, really. And I just wanted one or 2 that's socialized so they won't have to all the time, and it's like it would reduce the poop in like the public areas, and
Well, thank you for bringing that in. You're not the first one that has asked us about a dog park, so we have talked about that. But thank you for coming in and being willing to let us know. Is there anybody else that in the audience that'd like to speak on something not on the agenda? All right, hearing none, we're going to close the public participation and move into our consent agenda. So our consent agenda, these are items where all conditions or requirements have been agreed to or met prior to the time they come before council for final action. These will all be approved by one motion of council. So with that, I'm going to open up the consent agenda to public comment. So is there anybody that'd like to speak on something on the consent agenda? All right, hearing none, I'll bring it back to council. Does anybody have any questions or do we have a motion?
Consent agenda?
Second.
Counselor Cry,
Yes.
Counselor Bremen,
Yes.
Counselor Lenhart,
yes,
Counselor O'Brien,
Yes.
Mr. Buck. Motion passes 5-0.
All right. With that, we do not have any public hearings tonight, so we're going to move into the administrative agenda. So we've got one item on there, our Economic Planning System, EPS, Phase 1 housing presentation. So Dan, are you starting that? Or, oh, Mike is?
We switched it up on you. Sorry about that.
All right, that's all right.
Well, thanks, Mayor, members of council. Tonight, we have a pretty robust discussion, but first a presentation from EPS, who we've contracted to do a housing needs assessment or study on what we are facing in the Fruita community related to housing prices and specifically focused on workforce housing. So the workforce in Fruita having the ability to not be cost burdened, but and what that gap is in our community. So they're going to run through that. We would like to first just remind that, and a little bit of the presentation that EPS will go through will remind us of some of the goals that came out of the comprehensive plan that the community participated in throughout 2019, adopted in early 2020, and some of the things that we've already accomplished, and then some of the goals that we are still working on, and then the results of the study. At the end of the discussion, we would like to discuss a few things, next steps for setting very specific action items to achieve the goals, and the timeline, and looking at potential scheduling of special meetings early in the year, in addition to the regular meetings to meet some of the action items that we'll be working on. Also, the community education point or piece that we would like to do to share this information more widely throughout the community besides just in this meeting. And then the establishment of a revenue source to fund various strategies. So we're gonna kick it off with, let's see, we have Brian Duffney with EPS. EPS is a group who will be doing the presenting, and we also have Carson Bryant as well. And EPS is who worked with us during our comprehensive plan. And then we recently contracted them to do this study. And then we have a phase 2 study that we just received a grant to fund half of that. So we just received a $25,000 grant from Department of Local Affairs. We were just noticed a couple days ago. And so we will turn the time over to EPS to give the results of this study. And then we'll have some discussion and some things that we need to get some feedback and direction from City Council on so that we can keep moving forward on this topic.
Thank you, Dan and Mike. Just quick audio check. Can you hear us okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Again, Brian Duffney, I'm a principal with EPS here in our downtown Denver office. Andrew Knudsen is sitting with me here. He's a managing principal. And both of us have done a lot of work on housing throughout the Mountain West, throughout Colorado. And this is a really exciting project for us. And then our other colleague, Carson Bryant, is an associate here with us. And he is also closely involved in helping us with a lot of the analytical and strategy work on this as well. So we will share our screen and jump right in here. We've got, let's see, I don't know if I've got the ability as a host to share the screen.
We can get that.
Okay. I think we've got about 20 slides. Should take about 20 minutes to get through or so, and want to leave plenty of time for questions and discussion from you, Council. If we can't share it on your end, we could, here we go. Thanks, Henry. Okay, go ahead to the next one. Great. So we've got not necessarily in this order, but we're going to recap some of the comprehensive plan policies that Dan talked about as kind of a jumping off point, a little bit of context about different housing tools. And then we're going to jump into some data and some analysis on the Fruita economy, on wages, home prices, incomes, some initial input we've received from some pretty key employers and service providers in the community. After we get through that information, we can pause again and take some additional questions and discussion. And go ahead to the next one. Is where we are right now, why we're here, I guess, is to do a study, an economic study to support the proposed regulatory fee on housing transactions. And so the first part of that is to really define the issues and define the goals that we're trying to address with this regulatory fee. And a lot of that is the relationship between housing and the local economy and the community health, community viability. And that's where we are right now. We're going to be talking about in this meeting. And then we're going to be jumping quickly into phase 2 in January and February to look more specifically at the types of programs that we're recommending for the town, how much funding they would require, and what the sort of fee would need to be to support those programs. And then, coming back with recommendations on that and ordinance language. And so this isn't the only time you're going to see us. Next, please. So a little bit of context and background. Comprehensive plan is pretty fresh. It was adopted last February. I had a pretty big role in that. I really enjoyed working with the community. And it really helps set the stage for housing. Next, please. There are a lot of policy statements in there that are good kind of groundwork here. It says, I'll just read these. Fruita is committed to a land use pattern and supporting policies that promote access to housing across the income spectrum of residents. Allow and encourage a diversity of housing types that fit the needs of the Fruita community and provide the diverse, funky character that is treasured by residents. Housing choices close to jobs to support labor force. There was a lot of input from businesses during that process about the availability and the cost of suitable rental housing. They were having a lot of trouble attracting employees to help run and sustain their businesses. Diversity of housing types, supporting flexibility in zoning and supporting a diverse array of housing types as part of an economic sustainability strategy. Next, please. And so the comprehensive plan resulted in some pretty important steps. Some significant changes in zoning and land use policy, allowing more density around town. And those are, the community should be really proud of those steps. It's really important to align your land use and zoning with your community values and your goals. But the market still sets prices, right? And there's just a lot of demand and a lot of pressure on the housing market today. And more tools we think are still needed to really move the needle. The most common housing approaches you may have heard of are tools called inclusionary zoning. Another one is linkage fees. Those are affordable housing impact fees. And those have pros and cons. They work in some places and can be appropriate depending on the context. And they create units when the market is strong, right? You need development to get units out of those types of programs. What we really think is the best solution for communities to really take on housing is a dedicated funding source. And that's the purpose of this proposed regulatory fee, is to create a dedicated funding source. Because then you have a predictable funding stream. You've got annual revenues that you can plan for, budget for, and a dedicated funding stream also spreads the costs and benefits across the entire community. It doesn't just put it on new development. You've got more flexibility in the use of this type of a fund versus an impact fee, and you can target housing supply, home buyer assistance, gap binding, all sorts of programs. Anything to add to that, Andrew?
The only thing I would add is that it's important for communities to anticipate ways to increase the supply, either through their own efforts or through programs that catalyze the private sector. But that's one of the key parts of how we advise clients specifically around affordable housing.
Next, please. Basis for the fee. So as a regulatory fee, this is authorized under the city's police power. The police power is the power to regulate health, safety, and general welfare of the community. And so our study needs to show how the fee payers are likely to benefit from this regulatory fee, either directly or indirectly. And that's some of the information you're going to see tonight, and more we're going to be digging into in more detail in January. But the types of benefits we're talking about is allowing basically an available workforce that can fill jobs needed by residences and businesses. There's an economic impact of housing. When you purchase and occupy a home, you spend money in the community, you require certain services, certain types of businesses in order to live there and have a high quality of life in your community. A strong community where essential workers, emergency service providers, teachers, municipal employees, all of those essential services can live close to their jobs and be invested in the community. Culture and inclusivity and diversity of Fruita is maintained through a variety of housing types and price and rent levels. That's almost right out of the comprehensive plan. I think something else we can talk about that isn't addressed directly in the comp plan is the impact of commuting on climate and the environment. If we can reduce the amount of in-commuting into Fruita, which we'll talk about more in a couple slides, that has indirect benefits to residents. And residents benefit from fully staffed businesses, nonprofits, and service providers. So we're really taking kind of a workforce angle to this.
If I can just underscore a couple of the points Brian has made. The program that we're talking about tonight in some ways is complicated and in other ways is simple. And of all of the slides in the packet, this one here may be one of the more important ones. And it shows the simplicity of what we're all about with this endeavor. And it's really aligning benefits and recognizing how robust these benefits are relative to the costs that are generated. So this is worth pondering in greater detail when you have more time. So we'll take the next slide.
All right, next one. We're going to get into some data. Go ahead for the next one here. Carson, you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So, one of the main things we looked at in a study like this is how housing prices have changed relative to wages, right, and household incomes. And as Brian said, we're really focusing on the workforce in this, and examining and really probing how affordable the housing stock in Fruita is to people who work in workforce occupations and other essential occupations. So this chart looks at the income that someone would need, a household would need, to afford the median priced home over time, and compares that to the income of various occupations. And keep in mind, these incomes are household incomes. It assumes 1.5 earners in the household. So for example, for education, the salary that we benchmarked was about $44,000 a year. You multiply that by 1.5, you have $63,000 per year. So if we look at a lot of these essential occupations, so education, transport, healthcare support jobs, childcare workers, the current household incomes are by and large below the income that someone needs to afford the median priced house in Fruita as of 2020. And so this indicates a divergence between wages and incomes, and I think highlights this gap and this challenge that a lot of working households in Fruita face to invest in the housing stock and to actually participate in the housing market.
And what that's driving, next slide, please, is a lot of in-commuting. Right now, about 68% of the workforce commutes into Fruita for work. And so, a lot of housing policy that we've worked on throughout the years one of the cornerstones of it is trying to house more of the workforce locally. Commuting is a major source of greenhouse gases, has other environmental impacts, traffic, road maintenance, quality of life. to the extent that people can shorten that commute, live in the community where they work, especially in those essential jobs, we think that has value in just having a stronger community. You want to talk to the volunteering piece or any of that? Or?
Yeah, and I think that part of what we're trying to show is how the benefits of a program like this directly accrue to the community itself. The community has a more complete sense of identity with more residents working and living within Fruita. I think on the previous slide, it shows the range of workers that we're targeting with this and the benefits of having businesses that are fully staffed, which is becoming more and more elusive anywhere. And whether it's childcare, healthcare, what have you, increasing that labor to be able to staff those businesses is a key benefit to the community at large.
And Fruita is a really interesting place because it's kind of a gateway community, right? A gateway to a lot of outdoor recreation, super high quality outdoor assets, and it's also kind of a workforce or a sort of a veteran community of Grand Junction. And what we've seen in so many of the high amenity places in Colorado is that as housing prices go up, they get hollowed out, right? The essential, that local workforce can't afford to live there anymore. And it just becomes, more and more exclusive and harder to sustain that character and that identity.
Which is just a sneak peek to a future slide in this deck that we'll revisit or that we'll come to later this evening. And we heard this in interviews with key employers.
Okay. Next, please. All right, median home price. You got it, Carson?
Yeah, so we took a look at the median home prices of all homes in Fruita and also new construction, older construction, new construction defined as sold within 5 years of being built. And we found that all homes in Fruita, the median sale price has appreciated quite a bit over the past 6 years. It's gone up at a rate of 9% a year, which is pretty substantial. Another thing to note on this is the significant gap in median sale price between new construction and older construction, right? And all homes in general. There's a gap of over $100,000 between the new and the old. And I think this highlights some of the constraints with, relying on the market to deliver, affordably priced new construction, based on what we're seeing here, and in other factors that are contributing to, the higher cost of that new construction. So this is important to consider when looking at the trajectory of the market.
Next.
And another way to look at the divergence between home prices and wages is the difference between the median sale price and the affordable purchase price. That difference being what we might call an affordability gap. So as I mentioned, the median sale price increased at a rate of 9% per year over the past from 2013 to 2020, whereas the affordable purchase price, which in this case is based on the median annual wage in Fruita, only increased at 2.5% annually. So that divergence is only substantial and is likely to grow even more in the coming years.
Next. All right. So just a quick look at the economy in Fruita. The biggest industry is healthcare. The hospital is a major employer, but and that includes full range of services from the emergency room to the rehabilitation services that they offer, and a really wide range of wages in healthcare. A combination of food services, that's kind of hotels and restaurants and retail are also big sectors in Fruita. That's a combination of demand from local residents. As a growing community, you need retail, you need restaurants to have a quality of life. But also there's also a significant tourism component, right? As the gateway to the Colorado National Monument and all the world-class mountain biking just up the road from you. And the combination of those, creates, there's a lot of demand for kind of lower wage jobs as a result. Next. Looking at job growth real briefly. So there's been some growth in the public sector, but again, it's healthcare and social assistance, hospitals. That's been a significant growth sector. Accommodation and food services, hotels and restaurants, again, that's another big growth sector. Typically lower paying jobs. Next, please. Yeah, and as we alluded to, we got some really important input from some of the service providers and institutions in the community. We heard from some people at the school district that new teachers are really having a hard time finding housing. Some are still living in short-term rentals or Airbnbs after about a year of moving there. The lower cost of living and the high quality of life used to be kind of a recruiting advantage in Mesa County. That's kind of slipping away as housing costs have escalated. You know, a starting salary for a teacher is about $41,000. And so for a one-person household, that's 80% of AMI. And based on those gaps that Carson just showed, it's very difficult to find affordable, attainable housing, right? At those wages. Healthcare, about 70% of their workforce commutes into Fruita. And the challenge there is that a lot of these lower pay scale support positions, which are still absolutely essential to the operation of a hospital and emergency room, they're competing with other jobs in Grand Junction. And if you're commuting from areas of Grand Junction where housing is more affordable to a lower, a $14 to $18 an hour job, you're driving past a lot of similar paying jobs, and even a quarter cent an hour is a big difference. And if you can do that without the commute, you just might. So that's a competitive issue for attracting and retaining staff at the hospital. Law enforcement and emergency responders. We heard a quote, and I will keep it anonymous, that some of the workforce said, well, it's a great place to work, but you don't buy in Fruita. It's too expensive. So for a police officer, starting salary $52,600 with the city. That's about 100% of AMI for a one-person household. I think the really interesting stat is that today, or rather in 2015, about a little more than half of the officers lived in Fruita. Today, about 4 of them live in Fruita, and housing costs are a portion of that. I think we're getting close to the end of the information here. So housing diversity, we think, is also really important, right? To have a mix, to have an accessible community to a wide range of people and preferences and jobs and income ranges. You need different types of housing, right? You need the full spectrum, from small homes, apartments, et cetera, to larger luxury homes. And Fruita has been building mainly single family housing for the last 10 years. There are a couple of projects in the pipeline. They're bringing some multifamily units and some newer projects in 2021 that you see here, but by and large, it's all been single family. I think that's also something we want to focus on with this program, is incentivizing a more diverse mix of housing. Next. We continue to hear that the rental market is extremely tight. Vacancy rates are under 5% in Grand Junction metro area. We don't have Fruita specific data on that, but I think corresponds with what we've heard locally as well.
Just as a point of reference, that 4.2% vacancy rate that you can see at 2021 in the light blue, industry standard shows that 5% vacancy is equilibrium. In other words, at 5% vacant units, it accommodates move in, move out in just rough proportion. And as soon as landlords and management companies are able to get a unit ready for releasing, a tenant is ready to show up. So we're basically below equilibrium. And we have been, if you look at 2014, 2015, 2016, 2019, many of the years in the last 5-6 years have been sub equilibrium. So very tight supply.
Next, please. The other indicator that's really meaningful is cost burden. A person is cost burdened if they're paying more than 30% of their income towards housing. And for renters, more than half of them are cost burdened. And I think about a quarter of them are severely cost burdened. Severely cost burdened being someone that if you're paying more than 50% of your income towards housing. Next. The owner data the census hasn't really caught up with the market yet, as much as it has with the rental data. But the cost burden for ownership is less severe right now, but I think it's more of a supply and availability question. You do see a fair amount of cost burden in the lower income ranges, however. Next, please. Let's see. All of this really echoes what was found regionally in the Grand Valley Needs Assessment. I think we agree with all of their findings. Just really tight supply in for sale and rental markets. 33% increases in home prices countywide. They noted that Fruita had the highest median rent increase from 2010 through 2019, the period they were able to look at with available data. It's a 35% increase in rent in Fruita. They did a survey. 45% of the respondents had serious concerns about housing security, so threats of eviction, struggling to pay their housing costs, worried that rents are going to go up to unaffordable levels. And they also had input, I think, from the development community on just the cost of construction increasing that we're all experiencing. If you've tried to buy anything at a lumber supply store recently, fees and entitlement processes, the time, and local resistance to higher density housing by residents. And I think Fruita is taking bold steps to address a lot of this. So I know that was a lot of sort of doom and gloom, but I think I think this is a really optimistic time for the city to take on an issue like this with a tool as powerful as a dedicated funding source. I think I think there's a lot to look forward to. So why don't we pause there for a minute, and then before we go into kind of next steps, any questions, thoughts, reactions?
I've got a couple just for you guys. I know you guys were talking about workforce and the effect on that. Are you guys going to be doing any type of percentage of breakdowns for retirees and the different age ranges for that? Because we've got a good population of retirees and how that affects housing prices.
Sure. And so if we understand the question, that if we focus exclusively on the labor force, we're going to be missing a significant element within Fruita, and that's the retiree population, who in most cases are fixed in terms of their income and also represent a need relative to the housing supply.
All right. So I want to make sure you cover that. And then the other one in your jobs by sector, you had education only at like 10. And I want to know if you guys looked at, I don't know how you got that number, because I think of how many employees are here in all the different schools we've got for D51. So that looked like a really low number compared to the other sectors.
Yeah, that's a tricky number to pin down with the available data, and we can talk to the district and get a better number on that, because what we're showing there is if you want to get technical, it's private wage and salary jobs. So it misses a lot of that. Good catch.
Okay. Anybody else have questions?
Yeah, Joel, I was going to comment on that too. Excuse me for my voice, but because with 3 elementary schools, high school, middle school, and 8, 9, it really, I think it is a force in the community. I was also curious about, and this would be something that the school district would know too, just the homeless that we have that are, and how that impacts, the data that you're collecting.
That may be something that we look at when we talk more about the programs that we would be funding. Good.
Well, yeah, I'm sure that would have an effect, but I would be real curious just about that data as well.
Sure. Okay.
I think it'll be important for council to give direction to staff and the EPS in terms of the breadth of programs to consider. And we can give that a little bit of thought, and we'll get back with you on that. We can either do it with that component or without. Either way, I think the program stands on its own. But we may want to talk further with you about that.
Go ahead and flip to the next slide. It might prompt other questions that kind of round out where we're going, right? So, preliminarily, these are the types of things that we're thinking about, right? There's a lot of detail that needs to be defined here in these various programs, and more work between us and staff in determining exactly what our goals are, how many units we're trying to produce, because we need to have some pretty clear definitions of what we're achieving with this regulatory fee, where the money's going, to pass all the legal tests that we need to pass here. So, but I think we think the major components of it are supply focused. So that's housing production, rehab projects, preserving existing affordable housing stock is often a lot cheaper than developing new affordable or attainable housing. Programs for both ownership housing and rental housing, homeowner assistance programs like down payment assistance, that could be a major component. Term we call gap financing. So or gap closure. It's providing funding to help close the financing gap, the feasibility gap for building housing that is, collecting below market rent or charging below market sales prices. There's often a financing or feasibility gap in that kind of development. And then, stewardship and organization, tools to maintain long-term affordability. So it's not just a windfall for the first person that gets into a unit or is able to use a program. Community land trust could be in the mix. Land banking is just a fancy word for a community buying land and banking it for future development for affordable or workforce attainable housing, and forming a housing authority within the city of Fruita.
Your study is clearly, looking backwards, as studies do. But you show the housing mix in this year is substantially changed over the past 10 years. And maybe you'll get to this. Is there any way to start to predict the impact of our changing regulatory structure in terms of, 8 density units and what's currently being built, the mix that's being built, and what impact that will have on future pricing?
Sure, I'll take the first shot at it, and then Dan, I might ask you to weigh in. So that chart we showed earlier was just those were new building permits, right? And so it was single family, and then a bunch of, in 2021, a bunch of attached to multifamily products. So I can't remember the names of the exact projects that those are, but I think it seems to me that the land use and zoning changes that you've made have had an impact on the market to incentivize those different types of construction. Dan, could you maybe comment on those projects are in 2021?
Yeah, I think council's familiar with the current projects.
It's not so much what are the current projects, but is there any way to kind of forecast what those projects will have on home pricing moving forward?
I think Brian and Andrew, I think that this might go back to some of our discussion related to, there's been some proof of concept in the land use code changes where these variety of housing projects have instantly, come online and in production. However, what are you seeing as to the market prices of those in the future and the gap with pay of the workforce in Fruita, and how that will impact, not just in arrears, but looking forward.
Thank you for being far more eloquent in the question than I was.
It's a great question, and it's not an easy one to answer, to be honest. So we'll take a closer look at exactly what those projects are that are being built. But in terms of looking at the impact of the zoning changes, that's a hard question. I don't know at this point. I think we can do some projections and kind of think about how much capacity is in those areas. But at the end of the day, it's still, without the market still sets prices, right? And a rational developer is going to, charge what they can charge what the market will bear based on the price. And so what a lot of mountain communities are finding is that I know you're not a mountain community, but the issue is pretty parallel, is that they need tools, right? They need teeth to ensure permanent affordability for certain types of housing. You know, just zoning and affordable by design often doesn't completely solve the problem.
I might add also, a lot of times when we evaluate what's going on with a community, we look to the future, and there's two general buckets for the future analysis. And one is catch up and the other is keep up. And what does a community need to do to catch up? Pardon me. What does a community need to do to catch up relative to the need that's been created that exists today? And what does a community need to do to keep up as growth occurs within the economy and within the housing market? And I think that on the keep up part, we'll be able to look at the zoning code and model some likely outcomes in terms of the product mix that will likely occur based on the code itself and the zoning that's applied to vacant parcels. So we can definitely take that into account. It's a little bit of a tricky model to build, but very much within the comfort zone of what EPS has done in terms of model construction.
I think without knowing exactly what will happen in the future, what we're concerned about is if you go back to, you don't have to go back to it, but if you think back to the chart where the new construction's averaging $100,000 more than the existing construction or all houses, that, you know, the trend is that while we're creating more variety, which is helpful because we've had mainly one product, the cost per square foot is still on those market products is still high. So it creates variety where there might be some different price points, still high cost per square foot. So what are those things we can do to try and bridge that gap with the current workforce? And Dan wanted to add something as well.
I was just going to say that part of the conversations that we've had with EPS is a concept that is kind of littered throughout the Grand Valley Needs Assessment, which is this kind of term in, you know, communities or housing authorities that consider themselves housers, and that's the concept of renting down. So you see, I think it was it 35% or 33% increase in the cost of rent from 2009 to 2000, and I believe 20. Was that correct, Brian?
Yes.
So we have a lot of folks that are competing for rental housing, and they are those that have actual incomes that would represent being able to strive for home ownership have somewhat given up on the concept of buying real estate and are renting down for what is just an incredible tight market right now. So a lot of the planning directors throughout the valley have come to the conclusion that, you know, we're not just 30 units or 40 units from rental housing away from solving any sort of, you know, kind of keep up type or catch up type analysis. I mean, we were hundreds of units. I believe that the Grand Valley Needs Assessment identified that we're close to 2,500 units shy of just rental product out there. So, you know, even though they're two separate buckets, the for rent and the for sale, I mean, they have pretty dramatic impacts on one another. And, you know, I think we're certainly seeing that from the tightness in the rental market right now for those that are renting down as far as, you know, potentially striving for home ownership.
Reason to argue, you know, I mean, obviously we need more, right? And things are too expensive. That's statewide. That's many states across the nation, blah, blah.
Lori, can you talk into your mic? I can't hear you.
How about now?
Thank you.
Okay. Really, it goes back to the fee. So how much closer are we to feeling very comfortable that we can implement this fee and defend it and then implement it and collect fees for it to help solve this problem? How much closer are we?
At least from the staff standpoint, and I think we're aligned with EPS is that the data that we've found is only emphasizing the need to close the gap with something like the fee that can help with down payment assistance, in addition to finding some strategies to incentivize long-term rental. So when we talk about the robust down payment assistance, fortunately, if we were able to do the fee and cover 20% down payments for workers in Fruita and be, the city be a second on those mortgages. And of course, there's a lot built into that program so that it's not abused, so that there's payment back into the program and all of that, not to get into too much detail now, that if we were to do that, it's enough to actually bridge that gap with available inventory. To your question, Lori, related to how close are we? We have sound, what we feel very, very strong detail from the legal analysis on how to build that. We are prepped to enter a contract with EPS to start in January to actually construct the fee, to figure out what all the pieces of the legal analysis that you all have received, how that fee could be established, what that amount would be, because it has to be very detailed to exactly that use for affordable housing to address this gap that we're talking about tonight. So we would like, one of the things that we would like direction on from council, there's a few things tonight, and I can get into all of them a little bit later, but on this one, we would love direction to move forward with, we have to sign a contract with Department of Local Affairs for the grant, and then we would be signing a contract moving forward for phase 2 of this study to establish that fee and go through that process early in next year, which still gives you opportunities to, it's not a pre-approval of the fee, but construct the fee, and then you obviously have to approve and implement a fee moving forward with that.
What kind of timeline, I think, is what Lori's asking? Is it going to be in 3 months, or is
the timeline that we're looking at is something that would be going through, assuming that you are comfortable with the analysis of constructing the fee, then the earliest we'd be moving through a process would be March, and the end of March, early April, the first meeting in April, it could be the tail end of those approvals.
So all the analysis right now is, kind of moving forward, step 2 is, the fee structure and making sure legally it is defendable. Is there any part of this that can look at what do we have from a regulatory policy standpoint that could achieve similar goals or like goals that doesn't include a fee?
So, and I can have EPS answer a little bit of that, but that essentially was a lot of what we did going through the comp plan and land use code process, identifying everything we could do to influence without actually, but we're still lacking tools to actually influence the market. So we're influencing the creation of variety, but what we found in other communities, what we found with this issue is that the free market alone is going to stay at those higher prices. But the idea that we have with the down payment assistance is something that actually works with the free market and everybody in that free market to actually create the opportunity to bridge that gap for the workforce. The other idea that we've come across is incentivizing, looking at various ways that we still want to look more into and bring to council, so we don't have this fleshed out yet, but looking at ways to incentivize long-term rental in the community. And one of those could be where we already have in the code, where we created much more flexibility for accessory dwelling units. There's a lot of creativity right now that we're coming across that was fairly common in Europe, and it's starting to catch a little bit more in the United States, of creating where it's very easily, where homeowners can create accessory dwelling units that can only be used for long-term rentals and create more rental opportunities in the community. So there are, the short answer is yes, we can look at some of those. I don't know if Brian or Andrew want to add to that.
No, I think, hang on, we've got some loud noise outside our window here. Downtown, old building with single pane windows. But in terms of getting to the question, there's a toolkit with a whole variety of tools that the council could consider to supplement this tool or to work on different parts of implementation. One, without going through the list of all of the various options that exist, the one thing that we might mention is bang for the buck. And what tool will generate the greatest and have the most effect on the community in terms of creating solutions. And the concept that we're considering now has the potential to be significant in that regard.
If I might add, Councilmember Bremen, you asked, or at least what I heard you say is, have we done everything that we can do from an entitlement perspective to open up the doors, and will it make a material difference with the landscape that we presently have? And I think the answer to that is yes, but to a point. We are competing with, over 5,000 housing units, and we're bringing 50 to 80 on every single year. And so in order to make a significant kind of bite into housing attainability in Fruita, we need to actually use the existing inventory that's presently built in order to, raise those percentages of attainability for those that work in this community. We just simply do not bring on enough units every year, even with all of the simplification and expediting that we've tried to install into the land use code. I just don't see that it's going to make a material difference when we're talking about down payment assistance covering close to 60% of the units that we're able to bring on an annual basis in just sort of the traditional space. So I don't see that, silver bullet. I don't think that many other communities have seen that silver bullet as far as how much can we, kind of take back that doesn't sacrifice other priorities to make it as easy to bring things to the market as possible. I see no other way other than using the 5,000 units that we presently have to try and make a material difference.
I think one of the challenges, and not challenges, but one of the enlightening pieces as we've done a lot of research for other communities throughout Colorado, but also throughout the country. And EPS has done numerous studies for small and large communities, and not just many in Colorado, but throughout the country, is that none of these strategies that are being used or have been tested for decades are keeping up. And that's one of the challenges, right? They're not keeping up. Adding more money to those same traditional models still doesn't keep up with what the demand is or bridge that gap. And then we don't have to get into it, but as we've discussed in previous meetings, a lot of those strategies or models then create other challenges, right? Of whether it's managing rents, managing properties, all of those types of things. And again, as Dan mentioned, aren't utilizing existing inventory, which is something that we see as the only way, and just to reemphasize what Dan said, is the only way to actually have a significant impact on this issue.
Oh, yeah, Heather has her. Heather?
Yeah, thank you. I kind of have a two-part question. First, I wondered if our consultants at EPS had any opinions on VRBOs, short-term rentals, not accessory dwelling units, but VRBOs and short-term rentals, and how that plays into things. And then, so that's one. And then the second part is when you were talking about the creativity with long-term rentals, are there any ideas how to incentivize people to create long-term rentals rather than short-term rentals?
Short-term rentals, how much time do you have?
I got a lot of time. Go ahead.
Right. Well, it's really context sensitive. It really depends on the context of the community. And if short-term rentals are having, you know, a pretty significant measurable impact on the supply of housing available for long-term rent, then they, you know, they may warrant a closer look in terms of, you know, some type of regulatory program, right? There's a whole host of tools to consider with short-term rentals. And I think during the pandemic, our other clients in kind of amenity-rich communities are really seeing a lot of strain on their housing inventory from short-term rentals. Andrew, anything to add to that?
Well, EPS advised the town of Breckenridge, and Breckenridge adopted a short-term rental mitigation fee in November, and we're currently working with the town of Vail on a similar program. And so we're very familiar, and these are relatively cutting edge and charting new territory in terms of tools that municipalities can develop to mitigate the impacts. So there's certainly quite a bit of specificity that we could go into around that concept if it's needed or if it's of interest. The one part of the question that we heard was how do we minimize the impacts of short-term rental and then actually focus on solutions related to long-term rentals. And I think that there are many solutions for long-term rentals, and I would just mention a couple right now. One would be focusing on projects, and you know, the rental market needs to be strong enough for a community or a sub-market like Fruita to be able to absorb a conventional size of a standard rental project. 100, you know, I've seen some as small as 80 units, but those are rare. And then we can tap into the full range of state and federal funding programs with long-term restrictions that keep it affordable over an extended period of time. Also, and I'll just say this one last thing, and that is that there is opportunity to create new innovative programs at the local level to stabilize existing inventory. And based on units that are already in the rental inventory that are perhaps dated, that perhaps have been affordable in the recent past, we can create tools to enable Fruita to go in and figure out how to keep those units within the inventory and utilized by existing tenants that are there now. So combination, how do you tap federal and state resources? How do you think of scale as your friend? And how do you use scale to solve the problem? And how do you look at what's in the existing community today? And preservation is a key part of that.
Heather, your hand's still up. You have another question?
Yeah, I do. So you talked about you know, whether or not the VRBOs were actually having an impact on our inventory. How would these are some of the conversations that we've been having recently? And maybe this is a question first for Dan, but do we know what the impact of you know, if the short-term rentals are having a deleterious impact on our inventory right now, or how would we get that information?
No, I think it's a study. I mean, you got to inventory them, look at the characteristics of the homes or the units that they're in, look at the distribution of them in your community. And you know, there's a little bit of kind of analysis that, you know, would help you make an informed determination on that. Dan, anything to add? The other thing we're hearing of a couple of communities. I think it might be Breckenridge, somewhere else, that's trying to look at, or Summit County trying to look at some programs to incentivize people that short-term rental operators to rent long-term. You know, they're offering cash payments. There's information out there on this we could find. They're offering cash payments to some of these property owners to, you know, to rent to a local. And we'll have to, their new programs, we'll have to see how successful they are. I think it might be kind of expensive. I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you.
Heather, I would just add that, and this is more anecdotally, of course, we haven't done as in-depth of a study that Brian and Andrew were referring to, but we do know that we have a mix. When you look at, when you scan the short-term rentals that we've approved, we have some that are, we have some of those housing units that become a short-term rental that aren't in the mix of affordable housing. They're the new builds at the high-end prices, and they were not in the mix for an affordable ownership or an affordable rental. And so we know we have some of those. We know we also have we know we also have an inventory of short-term rentals, probably more than the latter, that were in the mix. So if you took the price of the purchase, and that could have been potentially in the mix for a rental or a more affordable unit. So we definitely see both. We know we have some multifamily units that are short-term rentals that used to be long-term rentals. So we know it's having an impact. It would not be accurate to say that every short-term rental is pulling away from an affordable unit or a rental property, but we do know that there is a mix of a decent amount of the short-term rentals we have that would have been in that scenario. So I know that's not extremely detailed, but we know it's a little bit of both.
No, I guess, I know this is a little bit on the side of what we're talking about tonight, but I can't remember if it was Brian who said, sorry about the doom and gloom report. And I don't see any of this information as doom and gloom. I see it giving us the current reality so that we have good information to make decisions with. So, was just curious about whether we could get and how we could go about getting clearer information on short-term rentals. So thank you.
All right, so Mike, what you talked about some special meetings. So what are we looking at as far as what are you guys thinking, and what does EPS need, I guess, for timeline?
Yeah, so a few things. Just going back through tonight for anybody listening or going through this process, obviously we're all well aware that the comprehensive plan created some definite goals to look into this. The interesting aspect, I think, of the data tonight is that when we did the comprehensive plan, we were looking, and EPS was looking at 2018, 2019 data. We're already seeing the more recent data that there's more people commuting to Grand Junction from Fruita to work, and there's less people that work in Fruita that live in Fruita in just that short period of time. We've also seen that the 9% inflation or increase in housing prices that has been annually, that we've seen a dramatic increase even since the data that we were looking at just when we were doing the comprehensive plan. We know that the survey results, right? 2021 survey showed that there was a decent amount of concern throughout the community on housing. And then I think, the reality as Councilor O'Brien mentioned of where we're at, showing that significant gap, puts us definitely in this next steps like you're talking about, Mayor. I think a few things that we're looking for some direction on is one, the first thing that we need to be working on that will bog us down later if we don't. So there's a few things. One, we need to get EPS working on the second phase of the study, because that gets us into the detail of how the fee could be constructed, exactly what it would do. That's something we need to get going, because it'll take some time to get into that data and get that going at the very beginning of January.
Mike, is that a motion we need tonight because we got that grant? Is that what we need?
Yeah, I think at the end of this, I think just direction on these things for us to bring back to council.
But with the grant, do we need that motion because of the grant or no?
No, we don't need a motion for the grant. We just need make sure you're still on board with us moving forward.
Okay.
It's with that. Then the second is we need to set meetings early next year to create a housing authority. So no matter which direction we go, how in depth we go, or how, or if it's only contracting or partnering with the Grand Junction Housing Authority, we're not able to implement most of these things if we do not have a housing authority. So what we'd like is direction for us to bring draft ordinance language on, or resolution language on how to create this, so that we can have a discussion on that. In addition to that, there's discussions that need to be had on what depth and scope we want that housing authority to actually be involved in. potentially bring in the Grand Junction Housing Authority again to talk about what they're doing and where we might have some partnership opportunities, and also discuss the people that would need to be appointed to that housing authority. Again, if we are still aiming for getting a lot of this rolling by April, we'd have to start that in January as well. The other part is we'd like to do more community education. So take the study that EPS has done and create a special city link that gets sent to every resident, just covering just where we're at in from an aspect of housing. You know, there's a lot of discussion, a lot of thought on it, but having the actual data of, okay, these are the workforces that we have, these are the average pays, this is the gap, this is how it's changed since even just 2015, when the majority of our workers were not cost burden, and now every sector is cost burden on for the average pays and on the average prices of homes. So to get something out on that, potentially more on the web, more on if we have to create a special video as we move forward, you know, so that's one bucket. So another is just have in some of the same meetings, have discussions about the specific strategies that we would like to implement, right? So that's where we get back to the fee as one, back to us bringing, and what we like is to set meetings where staff is bringing some recommendations for council to discuss, ask for more information, approve, those types of things. So with incentivizing long-term rental and incentivizing or creating opportunity to close the gap for home ownership. And then the fee establishment at the tail end of that study. So when we look at our regular meetings where we have, you know, first and third Tuesdays each month for our formal meetings, and then the fourth Tuesday for the workshop, we'd like to, tonight, we'd love to get direction from council to at least start scheduling when the one you want us to work on bringing recommendations on how to address this gap from both a rental and a home ownership standpoint. Two, bring recommendations and set time for discussion of creating a housing authority and what the roles and duties of that housing authority would be. Direction that you're good with us getting as much of just the data out to the public in every way that we can as soon as we can in the new year, and direction to get the second phase of the study moving forward.
All right, sounds like he explained it pretty well. Is everybody good with those four?
I'm good. I forget the name of the law firm that we worked with on the first. Snow maybe, and anyway, Butler Snow. Will they be brought in at any point in there to sort of kind of give us an idea of like, yeah, you're headed in the right direction, or here's something you might fill in before you call it done? Or
Yeah, as part of the fee establishment, you know, I think steps on that are first diving into the second phase of the study, EPS working on that, making sure council's feeling comfortable. But then we would need to bring Butler Snow in for two reasons. One, to verify that the work we've done to create that fee and connect to what their analysis is meeting that analysis that they feel is defendable, but then also to have them on retainer to defend in the likelihood that we may need to do that. So that would be part of like some of the tail end of that fee establishment, is bringing them in, starting to talk with them now to prepare them to be ready to do that analysis review, and then we'd have to look at contracting them moving forward. I mean, we contracted them to do the analysis, but we would need to contract them to both review and defend if needed.
I'm good with all the things you talked about moving forward.
Matthew? Heather?
Yeah, I'm good with it all.
Karen?
Yeah, me too. As many tools as we can get, rental and home buyers, I support that.
All right, so I give you direction, Mike?
I just want to make one other kind of assertion for the record. We do have a technical advisory group that has been, I think, very I don't want to make any broad sweeping claims with regards to, where each one of them sits with regards to this endeavor, but they have made a lot of the data that was necessary available to EPS in a really what I think is a pretty expeditious fashion. And, I just don't want to forget that, a lot of the impetus for this idea was to take a little bit more control, over our fate, so to speak, and keep, the housing sort of issue local, and to not, be so beholden to things that, require, just numerous amounts of staff and creating additional departments. The simplicity of the housing authority and the mere fact that we would likely have to reach outside of, just the Fruita city limits for some of the expertise and supported, functions within the private sector, and to have that relationship between the private sector and kind of our endeavor with making housing more attainable for our workforce. That group is somebody I do really believe we can rely on. Our consultant can rely on, the staff, but I just wanted to make it, abundantly clear that, we are really all working on it together, and we do have, that supportive function of our private sector, our private partners, assisting us with, fleshing out this, kind of sweeping approach that we're taking to workforce attainable housing. So I just want to make sure that, a big kudos to that group. There's some big brains certainly helping us. And, I don't want to forget that, those are our actual partners in creating housing. The rest of this is a lot of, pontificating about the theory of how we can make an impact, but those are the people that we're going to rely on to actually go build this stuff. And so, that's a huge part of the equation. So I just want to make sure that that was out there, and thanks from the city staff and just city in general for their help.
I think for next steps, the first meeting in January is going to be here before we know it, right? And I think what we'd like to do is, knowing that we have this direction from you, we will regroup internally with EPS, with the technical committee, and we will look at by the first meeting in January, likely at that meeting giving some form of an update, but it won't be I think heavy into this discussion just yet, but probably bringing some recommendations for likely a special meeting added in January, and discussing dates at that first meeting in January. We know that the month of March has five Tuesdays, and we are likely going to need a special, meeting on that fifth Tuesday in addition, if we're cruising through this. And there's a potential of, a special meeting in February. So I think we can kind of regroup knowing we have this direction, and try and map some of that out, and think, okay, we're going to have the discussion on the housing authority and creation and roles and duties at this time. We'll have the discussion on, other goals and strategies at this meeting. Maybe some of those are combined, but I think we can work internally, map that out. And by the first meeting in January, we'll probably need to formally schedule a few extra meetings in that first quarter of the year.
All right. I think we're all on board for that. All right. Thanks for the presentation tonight from EPS. We appreciate all the work you guys are doing.
Absolutely.
Thanks to you.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed it, and thanks for accommodating us this close to the holidays.
All right. We'll have a great holiday season here. All right. With that, we're going to move into our city manager's report.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, members of council. One other thing that was brought up in the previous discussion that I had on my list is, if you recall, and not to have a lengthy discussion tonight, but if you recall that right now there's a temporary limit on short-term rentals that is 50 within what we refer to as the triangle, and that triangle is within Otley, Pine, and 6 and 50, and that temporary limit expires April 1st, I believe. So council had set that, much earlier this year as a temporary timeframe to revisit. I know in previous discussions, there's been a lot of discussion on that and what the number is based on. As going back to the discussion earlier tonight, we don't have any specific data that's going to help us change that number, very easily, right? The only data we have is that we know we have a shortage of rental units, we have a shortage of, and then we have a gap for affordability of ownership. What we'd like to at least have council consider, and we can discuss at a future meeting if needed, is knowing all that we have to work on, especially those 4 areas that we talked about. And this is going to be a robust time frame and a lot of work. And knowing that we don't, until we have anything different, we'd like council to consider just extending that, because we don't know how we're going to bring something, that's going to change that discussion in any way, while we are trying to focus on all of these other efforts. So that can be something that we can place on a future agenda. I just know council doesn't want to necessarily have the same discussion as we've had a few times prior, because we won't have additional information necessarily to add. But that's something that we do need to consider, because doing nothing means the cap, there is no cap, and doing something means we either maintain it or change it. But I know from the feedback from council in what would cause a change in the number, there would need to be significant, study done to actually obtain something that would help enlighten that conversation.
I think we need to schedule it for another meeting, because I think it's just throwing it on us right tonight.
No, for sure.
You're giving us the opportunity to think about that. The other thing that I have a question on that is that I know part of this EPS study we said months ago was, hey, the study will shed some light on VRBO stuff or housing and that. And I didn't see that. And I think that's what Heather was alluding to earlier was, hey, do we have any information on that? And so I know that was the conversation was, hey, this EPS study will help us make a better decision on housing prices. But I guess I don't know if everybody agrees with that, but I don't feel like it has made.
Well,
that's why I brought it up too. Because I think we're all just kind of shooting in the dark right now, and to have some current information would be helpful.
I do recall in that conversation, but hopefully you all remember we said we can see if EPS can find other information, but it is highly likely that we will not have information that will just give us a magic number for the rentals, and that's definitely the case. So
you might have said this, and I was in another planet, but do we have a number for where we're at right now?
We've hit the limit of 50. Yeah.
We're
Even
at
after
50.
December 1st, because I know that was the time.
And how many are in the queue?
4.
I'm not 100% sure if this, kind of will satisfy the test or the bar that the council had for the EPS study, but just from where I'm sitting, in strictly kind of the land use sphere, we did find that there's $100,000 delta between new construction and existing inventory. We did find that, the price of long-term rental has creeped up to $1.23 per square foot, and we're really below that equilibrium. So, I think apart from doing some sort of analysis that says 71 is the magic number, which I don't know if we'll really ever get there because we're bringing new units onto the market all the time, right? I just don't think that that's a bar that we're ever going to be able to meet. But I do, not in total defense of kind of the question that Councilmember O'Brien and Mayor Kincaid had, I do really see some evidence on the periphery of just short-term rentals with regards to existing inventory, rental vacancies, and just the increase in costs to find long-term rental, embedded in that study. It certainly doesn't have a title or a heading that's specific to short-term rentals, but I do think it's reasonable to draw some, conclusions, around just sort of the environment in general. And I don't know if that satisfies the council as far as like a justification to keep it at a number, but I just want to say that like there is some data that's presented that does appear that, we're losing some of those rentals, to short-term rentals. I don't know if it's a 1-for-1 by any stretch of the imagination, because some of those units, as Mike alluded to, were never going to be rentals. They were fixed up specifically for that business endeavor, and well exceed even the price point for new construction. So it's a difficult, thing to weigh out, but I do think there's some evidence to support the fact that, the existing inventory we have is something that we really need to consider paying really close attention to, just from where I'm sitting.
Oh, is everybody good scheduling another meeting to dive into this?
I
Good.
do we had talked about increasing the fee for the short-term rentals. Would that require a study to sort of, if we were going to look at doing it as like a sort of a mitigation fee instead of just this is what staff time it takes to process this business license? Are we still looking at doing that sometime in the near future, increasing that fee, sort of maybe not to decrease the incentive that exists for people to gobble up these affordable houses and turn them into a business? But anyway, is that on the?
Yeah, I think you're right, Councilor Cry. The two things that were kind of left open were, is there going to be an additional fee that, in council's last discussion, in addition to just the processing fee that we already have, right? A mitigation type fee, and then any change to the numbers. So I think, and bringing this up tonight in this update was not to get a decision, just to say, want you all to be thinking it's something that's out there, and before that time frame, we need. So I think when we come back in at the first meeting in January and map out some of those meetings, we know to include that this discussion needs to be had as well on both those points.
All right.
Other updates, as far as the sewer goes, we have the contractor lined up for January for the line that we are repairing along 6 and 50. Staff did go to each of the businesses along that path and provide them with a couple page overview of what's going to happen. And the goal is to try and keep updates on a weekly basis, even if there isn't much of an update in a given week, but they know that that'll start in early January, and then we'll keep them updated, because there's going to be different parts where it could affect, how customers may be coming to a particular business when they're doing certain work on a given day. So we're going to work to over communicate on that ahead of time and try and mitigate as much as possible the impacts of that project, but also try and get that project done as fast as possible.
We've got another question too.
Okay, great.
Heather?
Yeah, I just wondered if there were going to be street signs for like the tourists so that they can still get to the restaurants and the liquor store and the laundromat and the businesses that they need to frequent. Because even though this is winter, there's, a lot of people are coming here still to mountain bike because we don't have any snow yet. So I just wanted to know if there was going to be a way that the tourists are going to know how to get to those businesses.
Yeah, we're going to, as we work with the contractor and as we've learned, even just in the temporary scenario, we're going to do our best to try and look at it both from the safety standpoint that we have to do, but also to show how to get to these businesses. We are borrowing, I believe, 2 electronic signs from the city of Grand Junction to help, give some notice as well of what's closing, ahead of time. There will be access to every business during the process, but it might be different, right? When they're on Plum, you might not be able to turn off a 6 and 50 on Plum, and you have to go around the block, and that's where we'll have to have some temporary signage, like you're mentioning, Councilor O'Brien. Very good point. We are working with the Office of Economic Development and International Trade right now, who is the agency in Colorado that is working with communities to fill out a questionnaire on larger projects that the state can utilize their American Rescue Plan or ARPA funds to help with larger projects. And we have had some extensive conversations with them about our H2S gas project that we have in the 2022 budget. But expanding that to where we can also not just fix the problem and fix the manholes that we've identified in the budget, but replace any of the sewer lines that are not PVC, which would be a large project. What happens is we fill out this questionnaire. Our contact at OEdit has pitched our project to their leadership, and they are willing, they would like to pitch it to the legislature. And that's how these projects will get funded, in combination with what we're putting into the project to expand that and maybe get a jump start on not a jump start, but get a leap forward on some of the problems that could arise in the future because of what we're fixing next year. That could, and the reason why they're interested is because it's one-time funds that could actually impact, that could help impact not having fees having to go up so high that affect housing and some of the other issues that are tied to that. So we are moving forward with that. We talked with Dr. Perry today at Colorado Mesa University, and he's helping us put together some of the economic impacts to answer those questions that they have to be able to review that larger sewer project. So we'll keep you updated on how that goes, but we're working pretty hard and fast on getting that in front to see if we can receive some significant assistance and get much more done than we were even planning with our own budget next year. And then just a reminder, city offices are closed this Friday and the next Friday. Both of the holidays that were normally closed on land on a Saturday. So the closures are on the Friday before. And then the last update I have tonight is I wanted to kind of present to you all the award that we received, which is called the Leading the Way Award. Again, as you're aware, the group that does our community survey, they do, I think, hundreds, thousands of surveys across the country on a regular basis. And we landed in the top 10% for the positivity of results and the from our residents related to services provided, related to what you receive for the taxes you pay, related to the perception of the community and quality of place. And so just wanted to, I'll bring it up and show it to you, and then we could like to get it on display, somewhere in the building or wherever that residents can see it as well. And there's been a little bit of media on it, so I'll bring that up to you.
Hold it up to the camera.
Yeah, maybe I'll bring it up to you and you can show the camera, Mr. Mayor.
Or are we gonna get a photo? For the next newsletter, or was that in the newsletter? This didn't make.
Kiss it.
Look at it, it's in a special box. Look at that.
Ooh, velvet, satin line. It looks like fancy cologne.
All right, can you guys see that, Heather?
Yeah, it looks great.
Awesome.
Holy smokes.
I don't want to.
Or he's like.
And just to note on that, our wonderful team member Shannon Basson, the assistant to the city manager, and our budget manager moving into next year, had a great quote in the Sentinel that we'll never let them live down. That it's like a 12-pound brick. So there we go.
I'd say it's closer to 20. All right, anything else, Mike?
That's everything.
All right, thank you. All right, council reports and actions. Nothing for Lori, Ken?
No, we didn't have a meeting for downtown board or AG. We do have finally new business we've been waiting on opened up this weekend.
Yes, yeah.
And Cavalcade had a variety show downtown. It was a big success. Thanks to everybody that helped out getting heaters down there. I think the crowd appreciated it, but a lot of good reception to that. So as we get that area figured out, it'd be cool to have things there. Whatever, events and things. Might not fit in a big, anyway.
All right, Matthew?
GGEP, we met last week. Community Hospital has loaned GGEP some of their HR team to do a new round of executive search for the new executive director. That process will take approximately 6 months to complete that process. And then we may be looking at updating the MOU between the executive or the economic development partners and including the Latino chamber in that as well.
Okay. All right, Karen?
Nothing for me.
All right, Heather?
Planning Commission met, but you'll be seeing all that coming soon. But I did have a question. We got an email from the family of Lyle Baldwin, who had served as mayor of Fruita and was a police officer in Fruita and a Mesa County sheriff. And I didn't know him, or I don't know the family. Lori or Joel, I don't know if you know the family, but I was just wondering if there was some way to do some recognition for his widow and his family. I reached out to Kyle to see if maybe anyone on the historic board knew the family or could speak of his service in Fruita, but I wanted to know if anyone else was interested in maybe recognizing him and his family.
I think it'd be a good idea. I mean, we've done it before for local residents involved in the community. So I don't know what it would take. Would it be a proclamation or would it just be a recognition? I know we've done them in both ways.
Yeah, we have. I think, we've had many proclamations in that. If someone could forward me the email, we could definitely work with whomever to try and learn more information too.
I can do that, Mike.
Great.
Thanks, Heather. Anything else?
No, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Hopefully everybody made it down to the parade. That was another good parade. Tourism Board, we don't have a meeting this month. We're going to have an early one, I think, the first week in January, because we've got Colvita Design is going to be the new agency. So we're going to meet with them just to get all our preliminary direction going on that. So that's the one thing I've got coming up. And so other than that, that's all I have at this time.
Regarding the chamber, we are hosting the business after hours in January again, which I believe is the second.
It's the second Thursday
So
from
we'll be
5:30 to 7.
Yeah, and it'll be in this room and in F-Works. We're jointly hosting that with F-Works.
Thanks, Mike.
The DMV, every time I come here, I see the signs that say it's closed.
It's
That-
cafe.
Yeah, so, okay.
They let Margaret, our city clerk, know that they thought it would be opening soon, but we still don't have any dates yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. With that, we're going to move into our executive session. So we need a motion to move into executive session.
I move to meet in executive session to discuss personnel issues, understanding that discussions of such session are specifically permitted by the state's open meetings law, CRS 24-64024F.
Second.
Counselor Lenhart,
Yes.
Counselor Buck,
Yes.
Counselor Bremen,
Yes.
Counselor Cry,
Yes.
Counselor O'Brien,
Yes.
motion passes 5-0.
All right. Thanks, James. I'm going to ask you to leave now. Yeah, Merry Christmas.